And today we're going to be discussing the second in the series of the habitat sections for Oregon State Wildlife Action Plan Technical Review. And that's formerly known as the SWAP. I'm letting some people in as we go. So we are recording today. We will be saving those recordings and they'll be available later if people want to revisit the discussion. So the topics we're going to cover today, there's 3 sections. We have oak habitats, Ponderosa pine woodlands, and late successional mixed conifer forests. Don't make me say that 3 times fast. And we're going to go through some basic meeting pieces up front, and then we'll have discussion as we go. So the agenda today is going to start with a welcome and setting the stage. We're going to talk through what the oak habitat section review looks like. We have a habitat changes trends analysis, which is pretty exciting, which is going to be included in different sections. And then we'll go through some of the updates and key questions. And at the end, really kind of emphasizing the kind of support we could use your help with and how to provide feedback and next steps. So to start off, have everybody in the right space. I want to be able to identify some discussion agreements. And this is just some basic principles for running a meeting and being able to hear from everyone. So please be curious, open, and respectful. All ideas are valid. And then differences of opinions are natural and useful. Please speak from your own personal experience. And everyone here is responsible for the process. My goal as a facilitator is that everyone gets to participate and that we need to be conscious of airtime. So how much space people are using. And, it's one of those step back, step forward. If you have something you want to say, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat and we'll try to get around to calling on everyone. Be respectful of confidentiality where appropriate. I want to make sure everyone is able to contribute and that only one person speaks at a time. And please respect each other's opinions, especially if you don't agree. And I'm going to be conscious of time and reserve the right to move this on if we need to get to some additional information in the presentation and the discussion. This is scheduled for 2 hours. I really don't expect it to run that long. I just wanted to make sure we had plenty of time in case people had things that they wanted to discuss. So I'm hoping that we can end earlier and let everybody be able to move on with your day. Any questions about these? And we're starting with this with all of these discussions. So if you've been on a previous discussion, you will have seen this before. So what's in the habitat sections? And this is kind of the basic content outline. They have discussion of what ecoregions each of the habitats are found in, a conservation overview describing the different habitats and what are the conservation considerations. There's a bit on limiting factors, and then what are the recommended approaches to dealing with limiting factors. And then one of the key things we're really looking for in this process is this has been updated through a number of conversations, but we really are looking for help from our partners to be able to tell us, like, are there additional resources? Is something missing that's important? And identifying any data gaps. So to start with, we're going to talk about oak habitats. And the big change on this one is that we've gone from oak woodlands to oak habitats. And the intention with that was recognizing how critical oak habitats are and that there's quite a variation, and that would be good to be able to expand this to include different type of oak habitats. And so some of the key questions that we'd like you to consider and provide feedback on are, have we identified a good range of oak habitat types? I think we don't want to go too far and put every single thing down, but we want to have a good representation of the different types. Do the limiting factors capture current issues for the habitat types? And are there updated resources that should be added? So those are my core oak questions to have people consider. So I'm going to go to, this is kind of serves as both an example and a discussion point. So this is the very first section of the, pardon me, the very first portion of the section. And we've done all of these habitat sections with numbers. And the idea is that when people are providing comments, it would be really super helpful if you're saying, hey, I'd like to provide a comment for lines 2 through 4 or lines, 100 to 110. It just helps us be able to come back and incorporate the comments effectively. And so I just put this down as an example of what that looks like. And so people have a reference point. But this also highlights some of the ways we've expanded this section to really go from just oak woodlands to really looking at oak savanna, oak forest, riparian oak. I've kind of lumped oak savanna and oak prairie with more prairie discussion in the grasslands piece. So just as for reference. And then we've also identified that oaks can be co-dominant in a space where we have oak fir, oak pine, and oak hardwood habitats. So this is kind of our first key question is, have we captured all of the key habitats that we need to under oaks? And is there something that's missing here? So I'm just going to ask that question and see if folks have thoughts on that. Yeah, go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, I was just curious, being with NRCS, we rely heavily on ecological site descriptions and state and transition models. And so has anyone kind of taken to heart or evaluated whether we're looking at the same oak ecosystem at varying states? Do you know what I mean? Like there's varying states of disturbance and states of succession. And so I'm curious to know if we're talking about the same habitat, just in varying successional stages, essentially, and management stages and objectives.
We haven't really looked at it in that. I mean, there's been some analysis on kind of changes in habitats and transition over time, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a couple slides. I think for the purposes of this, it's been more, let's expand the definition to be more inclusive of the range, understanding that there's a lot of gradient based on how sites are managed or not managed, or absence of fire, absence of the caretaking that's happened over so much time. So I think that we haven't gone to that level of detail. We've really just been focused on, are we capturing the kind of the broad spectrum? One of the things I also wanted to just, for folks' perspective, is this is the audience for this is general public. And so we're really trying to have something that's pretty understandable for a lot of different audiences. And I think at a simpler level than we would often do for a scientific paper or process. And so that's just a balance we're trying to strike on the level of information. So I think there's recognition that we have a lot of habitats in transition depending on what the site conditions are, but right now we're just trying to say, is this representative enough? Are we missing something important? Does that help?
It does. I guess the way by calling it habitat versus just an ecological like a vegetative, like a plant community, it makes it a little bit convoluted, I think, when it transitions over to NRCS language. And so it's just something that I've kind of struggled with, because for us, we're looking at oak as a plant community. Habitat, I'm wondering if you're just speaking about species generally, or are we talking about certain species that use this habitat type? Are we talking about vegetation characteristics for the oak plant community itself? Habitat just seems, a little bit vague, I guess. And
Okay.
the reason it makes sense or is important from an NRCS perspective is that we do point to the Oregon Conservation Strategy or SWAP for a lot of our management decisions and recommendations for clients. And so, as a biologist, we have ways to evaluate habitat. But when I've tried to translate that to oak, I'm like, but we're really just looking at the oak plant community. We're not really evaluating it as having habitat characteristics, generally speaking, because really the reference state would probably provide optimum habitat for most wildlife. And so without getting into the reference state or you know, to me, I'm thinking oak savanna could be very similar to oak woodland, oak forest, and riparian oak. It just depends on the disturbance regime and the climatic conditions and the potential soils that are feeding into that. So I understand that you're keeping it generic for public. I'm just trying to decipher how can I translate this so it's applicable for our agency once this is kind of refined. And I do have I invited Andrew Owen, who's our state forester as well for NRCS Oregon. I think he's on the call. So just trying to make sense of it. And I appreciate you kind of enticing questions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback. I'm gonna have to think about that one a bit. Pick Andrew's brain too. So yeah, I made some notes, and just we may have to have some additional discussion on how are we using this as a resource and a reference. So I appreciate that. Any other thoughts on this? Yeah, and if something comes up and you want to pop it in the chat too, please feel free. Okay. So one of the components that we wanted to talk about today is that we recently completed some work with Institute for Natural Resources, and they did an Oregon vegetation change analysis for us, looking at maps from 1851 through 2023, with the intent of trying to have some insight on how have some of these different key habitats changed or what's their trends over time. And so we ended up with a product that provided perspective for some habitats. So you'll see that it's included over time in places where we had enough information to really kind of be able to pull out some kernels and some pieces that would be relevant for a section. And so this effort was the goal of it was really to be able to look at the total area and spatial overlap between vegetation classes, and how vegetation classes have been defined has been pretty different depending on which set of maps you're looking at. And so they focused on being able to look at the ones where they could say something with some confidence between some of the different map components. And we looked at pre-settlement, which is 1851 to 1937, kind of turn of the millennium, 1998, and then contemporary, which is 2016 is our more recent data set, plus some additional mapping resources to be able to bring in additional information as possible. And so you'll see this show up periodically in the different sections, and I wanted to look at kind of the oak example today and see if people had questions about this. And Ray, if there's anything you want to add to that, feel free. I think Ray's still here. Yep, okay, great. So here's the habitat trends analysis example for Oregon white oak. Oh, Oregon oak, both white oak and black oak. So we looked at how are these vegetation classes being compared over time, and their different habitats are lumped a little bit differently. And so the analysis of this was really looking at the oak woodlands, since that's the original habitat description we were working with. And for this analysis, we looked at open structure was maintained by fire, and subsequent fire suppression and development pressures really led to the loss of oak habitats. And then the current analysis found that we had a significant decrease, which I think everybody knows, in oak woodlands and forests in favor of oak and conifer forests and agricultural uses. So I think part of, responding to some of the discussion we were just having, we've had a shift over time as oak woodlands have become more dense and have been invaded by conifers and have been converted. And so that the end result was that approximately 8% of the 1851 oak are still oak forests in 2016. And so, as I think most folks know on the call, if you're looking at oak, that there's been a fairly significant loss over time. There are some challenges in comparing because the vegetation classes have shifted. And so we've been trying to pull out what we think are kind of the most significant kernels from that information and to be able to present that to you. So you'll find those sections in the different, you'll find this information in the different sections. Any questions on this? This is a quiet group today. Okay. So we'll move on. So as I said in the beginning, we're talking about 3 of the different sections. The second one is, oh, sorry, Jamie had a question. Did you quantify change between 1998 and 2016? Ray, do you remember on this one? Otherwise, I can go back and look at it. Oh, okay, sorry. Looks like Ray can't talk today. We did look at changes between different time periods on the map. I don't remember off the top of my head on this one. Because sometimes you could compare between two of the map series, but not all 3. And so I think that this particular one, we did a summary of the looking from 1851 to 2016. I'd have to go back and look at the analysis for additional information. Oh, yeah, Ray said, yes, we did. But the 1998 map is less accurate because it didn't capture small patches. Great, thanks, Ray. Any other questions? This particular piece should be in the responding to Jamie. This text should be in the chapter, in the section. I keep calling them chapters, but we're calling them sections that we submitted online. And if it's not, I would go back and double check. But I included this one from that piece. We don't have we're not including the full report because we're taking pieces of the report for different. Yeah, we're taking pieces of the report and I haven't put it. So I guess if that's one of those things that we get a request for additional information, then we can look at adding. For the moment, we put in some of the summary pieces. Okay, great. I'm just keeping an eyeball on the chat. Any other questions on this? So now we're going to transition into late successional mixed conifer forest updates. So what we have updated in this section includes updating some key information. There's some more work that could be done though. So I'm highlighting this as places where if you have additional input or you would like to see more in a particular section, we'd appreciate that. So we updated some of the wildfire planning work for this habitat. We also we were trying to figure out how to handle the Northwest Forest Plan draft EIS. So that's in process right now. And we want to acknowledge that the Northwest Forest Plan is a pretty key component for this, but it's also being looked at and we have some uncertainty on kind of what the ultimate product's going to be out of that draft EIS process. For now, it's in here, it's discussed that it's being updated. Hopefully we'll be able to get some additional insight into that before this becomes finalized. If we don't, we're going to have to kind of straddle that space of what's current and then what are we expecting. We've also added private forest accord information. That section, if there's more that people want to say about that, that could definitely be updated to be more robust. We did add a habitat change trends analysis component to this section. And then it's the space that really could use additional resources. And so if there's other components that people want to identify or newer research or anything like that, that would be really appreciated. Any questions on this? I did not pull up the specific habitat change trends analysis language for this part of the presentation. But if you have comments or questions on it, feel free to follow up. So then the last section that we wanted to talk about today is Ponderosa pine woodlands. And we have some key questions to consider for this. So we've added some additional information, but we want to know if we captured the full range of Ponderosa pine characteristics. We added some of Willamette Valley pine, which is kind of a different nature to it. But I think that if there's other pieces that people have knowledge on and information, it would be helpful to have just to flesh out some of the different ecoregion descriptions. And then are there any limiting factors that you think need additional updates? So if we have any other things that are affecting Ponderosa pine significantly that we have not captured, it would be really helpful to have that information. And then as well with all the rest of these, what additional resources should be included? So those are some of the things we'd like you to consider as you review these sections. Any questions? So why are we asking for your help? And we've gone through a couple of review processes. We've had some initial feedback solicited. As we were developing like what needs to be updated altogether, we've had some internal work. And now we're really asking for partners to say, hey, we've looked over this. We would like to suggest this additional information. We're trying to make sure that we have a good understanding of distribution between different ecoregions. What are the conservation needs, limiting factors, et cetera. And then what would be really helpful is if you have specific comments to be able to include peer-reviewed references and resources as available. It's also super helpful if you can kind of provide direct language, because that makes it easier for us to incorporate new information and new section into the sections. And then if there continue to be any significant data gaps where it's like, hey, we really need more information about this particular space, that would be helpful. And so this is the kind of technical support we are requesting from you all. What does that process look like? So on the revision webpage, there's an online feedback form, and this form is a good opportunity to be able to say, hey, in this section, I really want you to work on this. We're giving about a 2-week window, and I see Andrew's comment. I'll get back to it in a minute. Requesting that folks get their comments in so that we can update the sections as we're going and be able to have all those pieces put together. Okay. So I'm just looking at Andrew's comment that and I will harvest anything out of the chat to be able to add that to the considerations.
Janelle, I also noticed in some of these we talked about, sorry, I just interrupted there, just jumped right
Yeah,
in, but
it's fine.
also some of them we start to talk about management implications like fuels reduction. I don't know how far you want to get into that, but like if we talk about a fire adapted ecosystem, we should talk about returning fire to the ecosystem if it's void of now. So I was a little bit confused in some of the cases we talk about fuels reduction and what that looks like. Um, I think if we're going to go down that path, we should walk it all the way out to like what a
Okay.
fully restored or fully implemented state of that forest might look like. So that one just I sort of took a deep dive on the Ponderosa pine one because it covers a huge majority of the state, and noticed that was a piece that might be either lacking or could be beefed out more.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think the art we're trying to do with this is to be able to articulate the concepts of what does that mean, for fire adapted communities, and what does it mean to have fire on the landscape without getting highly technical. And so that's, when you're asking for feedback from a lot of ecologists and biologists, that's not the easiest thing for us all. But if we can find a balance, so I think providing us with this needs additional work in this area, and here's some suggested language is really helpful. And I think that's we're trying to keep these manageable in length, but I think if we're missing key concepts, that's really important for us to build back in, or build
Okay,
in
great,
if we just missed it. Yeah.
That's great feedback to know, like the scale that you're looking for. So yeah, certainly happy to do that.
Yeah, high level. But I think it's important if we have, especially if we're missing key concepts, that really will help people understand the nature of that particular habitat type.
You got it.
So yeah, I appreciate that. Go ahead, Jamie.
Thanks. Just following up on that, thinking about the level of feedback to provide, I want to also check in on like the nuances amongst the geography. So for example, I'm looking at right now the oak habitat write-up and wondering whether or not some statements about the conifer mortality, the dead and dying Doug fir in Southwest Oregon, which is impacting our oak habitats, would be relevant, or if that's like way too science in the weeds, geographically limited to my area.
I mean, I think with the ecoregion descriptions, there's definitely space for saying in this particular ecoregion, this is, is an important issue. We're looking for that. We're looking to identify the, because there's a lot of, we're talking about trying to capture all this information across a broad, a broad spectrum of habitat types. And so I think if we can identify where there's critical places, I think what we're not looking for is like a specific location. So, but I think if it's within the ecoregion context, that's great.
Okay, thank you very much.
That would be helpful. Other questions on that level of what do we need? I will say we are intentionally not including references in the text for accessibility and readability. If you do want to have a reference you think is important, that we are having both a reference and a resource section. Not every one of these different habitat types has that. So if there's something you're like, hey, this is a critical article that supports this information, we can put that in the references. And then resources tend to be more of the general, let's what studies, what websites, what work. Like there's been a lot of oak work, and so do we have the most updated resources available for people to click on to get more information? And so that's one way as well of extending here's the concept in the text, and then here's if you really want to like get in more into the weeds or understand more of a principle, then we can capture that in the resources. Just food for thought. Okay, so next steps, as I'm going to actually go back a slide slightly. So we're asking for feedback on these sections, pardon me, no later than April 14th. And that just, first of all, I find deadlines to be helpful. And second, it allows us to work through these in sequence. And so we can incorporate the comments that we have and keep going. Vegetation type versus habitat type, which is it? Well, I think that we're referring to them as habitats, and that's the perspective that we're using for this set. I probably am going back and forth, but it's also hard for me as an ecologist sometimes to like keep it general, and so that's my apologies if I'm moving between terms. Okay, next steps on this is we're going to have some additional sessions like this. And so our topics coming up are flowing water, wetlands, and lakes. And that'll be next week. And then estuaries and dunes a little later in April. And then grasslands and sagebrush will be the last of the set that I'm helping to facilitate. There may be some additional meetings for other topics related to the swap. But here are the ones that are next in the habitat series. And then, as we said, comment forms are available on the revision webpage, or you can send an email, and then that gets distributed to the folks that are working on the different sections. Sign up for updates if you need to. And then the last piece on this is just kind of where are we in the timeline? So this process has been going on for quite a while, I think, as most folks hopefully know. And we're now in this February to May window here, where we're working on both getting partner technical review and doing public outreach and education. And so this is this February to May where we're going through this series and asking for your help. And the goal is to have a final draft swap done by July so that we're able to take it to the ODF&W Commission for swap approval in August. And then this goes to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in October. Are there any questions on schedule? And the last one's really a thank you, in that here's both the email if you want to provide follow-up thoughts or additional information. And then here's the website where you can go to find all the different sections, and then the presentations will be posted as well. And we'll also have an opportunity, you also have an opportunity to submit comments.